Okay, everyone. Before this video starts, I want you to all get out your salt shakers and take out a few grains. You're gonna need them to get through this video.
Hey!
Oh, hi.
You look familiar. Do I know you? Did you go to that non-specific school?
Frank, is that you?
Sure is. How you been?
Been holding up. I married Jezebel, and I've started collecting knives.
Really? What kind of knives do you like?
I really like the elegant, thin blades, you know?
Wait. You're not one of those fillet knife guys, are you?
Yes. You're not one of those Bowie knife people, are you?
Sure am. Best knives in the whole world, hands down.
Oh, okay. I'm guessing you think you can chop down an entire forest with a Bowie knife. I bet you sleep in your pickup truck.
I bet you sleep in your boat. How many fish have you even caught?
More than the number of bison you've hunted. You know the Alamo was a long time ago, right?
How dare you disgrace the memory of Jim Bowie? He was an American hero. The only place you'd ever defend with your life is Bass Pro Shops.
I'm sure they're both fine.
For hundreds of years, knife enthusiasts have fought over which is better, longsword or katana. No, I'm just kidding. They fight over the Bowie knife and the fillet knife. This conflict has been happening for hundreds of years, and many small skirmishes have been fought over it, in which fillet knife enthusiasts have lost devastatingly every single time. But they argue that that's not what the fillet knife is for. It's a delicate instrument meant for cutting and flexibility, whereas the Bowie knife enthusiasts talk about their thick, meaty spines and edges that could fillet a fish just as good as a fillet knife, or cut down a tree if necessary. I'm here to settle the conflict once and for all, and tell you which is the objectively better knife. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to make one of each. Let's do it.
I think it's important to say this at the beginning of the discussion because I want you to keep in mind I am not biased towards one or the other. I have no preference for the fillet knife and I have no preference for the Bowie knife. So I feel you should keep that in mind. Don't go to the comments and be like, oh, he clearly prefers the fillet knife for so-and-so and so-and-so reasons. I don't. I'm very unbiased. So bearing that in mind, I think we can hop into this issue and I can start my discussion. So, I believe that most of the controversy surrounding these blades and why these different groups are hashing it out over which is better and have been for quite some time now deals with the origins of the knives. They've come from very different places. People outside of this discussion who aren't as involved in the knife maker community argue that this isn't even a comparable thing. The Bowie knife and fillet knife are very different. But that doesn't matter. I'll forge the fillet knife out of this piece of leaf spring, because it's, springy and it'll hold a good edge. So, there's my reasoning behind that. It was extremely well thought out. Thank you very much. Okay, be honest with me. Did that look okay? Because the audio got really bad, and I had to voice over it so you'd know what I was saying. And I know what you're gonna say. Oh, he's forging the Bowie knife out of Damascus and the fillet knife out of leaf spring. It's not even a fair comparison. Well, historically, these knives weren't forged out of the same material, so why would I forge them out of the same material? The fillet knife needs to be springy, so why would I make it out of Damascus? And if you look around at Bowie knives today, you'll see a lot of them made out of Damascus. This is actually a very heated point in the controversy, the materials these knives are made out of. Bowie knife enthusiasts have always preferred high-carbon steels, despite the upkeep needed. And in recent times, fillet knife owners have been transferring over to cheap stainless steels that don't even harden. I think, personally, I'm even giving the fillet knife an advantage by making it out of leaf spring, as opposed to some of the cheap stainless steels that are used today. The steels are part of the reason this controversy has been around for so long and is still debated to this day. It's also the fact there's so many facets involved in this discussion. But I did promise earlier I'd talk about the history of these knives and how that further separates their fan bases. A lot of Bowie knife enthusiasts think that the name of the knife comes from the American hero Jim Bowie. However, his name only changed the spelling of the knife's name. The origin of the knife's name refers to the curvature of the blade, both in the belly and in the swooping clip, which resembles a bow, and so it is the Bowie knife. And I could talk for hours on the Bowie knife pronunciation. Some people go Bowie or Bowie, but in the end it doesn't really matter because they're all talking about the same knife. On the other hand, if you call a fillet knife a fillet knife, you should really check a dictionary. That is not how it's spelled. It's clearly spelled fillet. Where some people get the T sound is beyond me. Despite its common use today as a fish filleting knife, that wasn't always the case. In fact, many historians believe that the fillet knife's origins can be traced along with the scimitar, where people who would carry the scimitar would also carry a fillet knife as a sidearm. Now, when I say sidearm, your mind might immediately jump to fighting. But no, that's not what the fillet knife was used for. It was used so that whenever they would go hunting, they would be able to skin the animal on the trail. This view is very widely accepted and goes to show why the people carrying scimitars generally were able to keep their whole armies fed. And there's another point of controversy. Because of the fillet knife's noble origins, modern Bowie knife users see modern fillet knife users, and they're posers. Why are they using it on fish? It makes no sense. There's few things that the Bowie knife community hates more than posers, which is kind of unfortunate because the fillet knife community sees them as posers. The fillet knife community views them as the type of people who buy a really nice fancy truck and then never put anything in its bed and never use it for its intended purpose. There you have it. There's the history of both knives and how that causes controversy between both groups. And I do feel like it's really important for me to make this video, even though I will likely draw a lot of hate and criticism because of it, and because I'm making both knives. With the history of both knives out of the way, it's time to talk styling. And oh boy, is this a big part. As you may have guessed, the Bowie knife enthusiasts hate the fillet knife style. They think it looks dumb. Why is it curving backwards? That's so weird. Just get a spine. Make it straight. And fillet knife enthusiasts complain about the Bowie knife really not having a fixed style. One of the main qualifications for being a Bowie knife is just having a clip point, which is a very vague qualification. Personally, I tend to lean towards a long clip point on the top of the Bowie, a moderately sized belly, as well as an S-guard. But there's a lot of different styles. There's D-guards, there's coffin handles, and a lot of really cheap Bowie knives that mostly try to imitate the style have really short, really swooping clip points, which, in my opinion, don't look the greatest. Now, to many people, the Bowie knife has a specific iconic look, which I don't really hold with. I think the Bowie knife is more of an idea as opposed to a fixed design. That gives anyone who wants a Bowie knife an opportunity to pick the Bowie knife they like the best, and gives people who make knives the freedom to choose. What is this Bowie knife's main features? How should its proportions be done? And I know that a lot of people may not like the Bowie knife I create. Even people who generally like Bowie knives may not like the styling I put into it. And that's a reason to love the Bowie knife, or, in the fillet knife owner's case, hate it. Because of the fillet knife becoming known for a specific purpose, that is, to fillet fish, it's fallen into a design that just sticks, and in my opinion, it works.
While that 216 layer Damascus cools down, I'm going to take some meat off of this knife, because for a fillet knife, it's still quite meaty.
Great. Here's the part of the video I've been dreading. Edge geometry. I know I'm going to upset a lot of people, but you can't have it both ways. You cannot cut through a cinder block and then slice a piece of paper and get no damage on the cinder block, because the thickness of your blade directly translates to how well it can cut. Yes, I know there are other factors at play, like what material the knife is made out of or how far it was sharpened, but mainly it comes down to thickness. If you buy a knife and it's a ½ inch thick and it's got really short bevels, guess what? It's probably made of some really, really cheap steel. Now take that logic in reverse. Since the fillet knife's so thin, wouldn't it be made of the best steel? Not exactly. Because big manufacturers know what you're going to do with a fillet knife, they know you're not going to be abusing it. You're going to be using it for cutting meat. So they can get away with making it a cheap material and making it thin. And people buy them. You can get a cheap fillet knife for way cheaper, surprisingly, and just keep a knife sharpener in the boat with you. And as I said earlier, this creates, guess what? Controversy. Fillet knife users are attacked because they have chosen the cheaper option. The cheaper knives are generally easier to maintain, so buying one makes sense if you're going to use it on a boat on slimy fish. And for Bowie knives, quite a few of them are cheap as well. Yes, I know. I said a lot of people still prefer high carbon steel, and they do. But it is expensive. It's expensive to get high carbon steel, which is really unfortunate. Having a high carbon steel blade results in you having to take care of it, which is sometimes a chore. And I'm quite grateful that the person who ordered the fillet knife from me actually chose high carbon steel, and that shows that he's willing to take care of it, even though it might be a bit of extra work as compared to the normal option.
And that is a raindrop Damascus Bowie knife, fully forged. I didn't do bevels or anything because generally when I do bevels that messes up how the heel of the knife works. Generally I have to grind around that and make the knife look not quite as good as it would have otherwise. You can kind of see the pattern peeking through the steel, and it looks amazing. It really does. This is going to be great. A big thanks to the person who ordered it, because this is a fun project. I actually have a few rough lines to follow when I grind the profile of this already sketched on here, so I guess I'll start doing that.
Wow, I really kind of got sidetracked again. Where was I? Oh, right. Edge geometry. Through edge geometry, you can tell what a knife is made for. And Bowie knife enthusiasts claim that Bowie knives can do everything. First of all, no they cannot. That is actually impossible. For a knife to do everything a knife can do, it would need to have all edge geometries of every single knife simultaneously. It may seem like a big duh, but Bowie knives cannot fillet a fish better than a fillet knife can. It just can't happen. A lot of hardcore Bowie knife fans make ludicrous claims that a Bowie knife can fillet a fish better than fillet knives can, or chop through trees. And while it is plausible, it would take a very long time.
Holy cow. That that made me nervous. This is a pretty thin blade. I thought while I was fullering, I was going to get close to going all the way through it and just making a hole in my beautiful raindrop Damascus blade. Still got plenty of meat in there. The fuller looks pretty good. It still needs to be cleaned up on the sides. But I haven't even heat treated this thing. So I'm going to roughen the bevels, then light the forge, and dunk it in some oil.
Okay. I hear you. Yes, I'm putting a fuller in the Bowie knife. What do you want me to do? Put a fuller in the fillet knife too? I can't. A lot of Bowie knives have fullers. I don't know what to tell you. This comparison isn't going to be completely perfect because the knives are not the same. Now, heat treating. That's something I kept consistent for both blades. I normalized both of them, I quenched both of them in Parks 50, and I tempered them both for 2 hours at 400 degrees Fahrenheit in the toaster oven. I know they're different steels, and some people will say they should be treated differently, but really, they don't need to be. I've had great success doing fairly standard heat treats on both of these steels. And yes, I am for heat treating. While not as good as using a heat treating oven, it gets fairly good results. Maybe someone in the future with a heat treating oven and better equipment could make these knives and compare them in their own video.
I'm having a tiny bit of an issue. I don't have a flat spot in the forge where I can place the fillet knife so that it doesn't bend when it heats up. Because it's so thin that when it heats up, it can just fall over. So, here's the game plan for the fillet knife. It's gonna be a little warped, and I'm gonna dunk it in the oil, then transfer it over to these boards and sit on it. And hopefully that'll straighten it out. It's kind of a long shot, yeah, but it's my only option. Here goes nothing. Woo! Well, if that isn't cool, I don't know what is. Okay, it's definitely warped, but here we go. I should have checked better if these boards were flat. Okay, time to temper them.
Both of the knives were promptly tempered and then finish ground. Some of you might be interested in how the whole controversy started. Now, here's where the water gets murky. I know about steels, and I know about the origins of the knives, and I know about edge geometry. But one thing that's kind of tricky is the origins of the controversy. When was the first war actually fought over this? One of the reasons this is actually so tricky is that I think it was around 7 BC, the Bowie knife enthusiasts raided the Fillet knife enthusiast library and burned it. Because of this, it's basically impossible to know how the whole thing started.
I ground through it. It's not over yet, though. This has way too much work that's been put into it for me to throw it aside. It won't be exactly what I wanted, but I'm thinking that in this spot where I ground through, I can add a slit to it. You will be able to see through the blade. I just need to see if I can make it look good.
Aside from the setbacks I might be going through, one of the setbacks historians have encountered is altering of events. The people who wrote down the fillet knife history had a tendency to, shall we say, fudge the numbers. They would write down the numbers of troops lost during battles with Bowie knife enthusiasts, and it didn't match up with what geologists were able to find and discover. The number of fillet knives on the battlefield was always greater than the number of Bowie knives, and significantly so. Because of this, it's widely accepted that fillet knife users actually went extinct for a period of time. Only in the last 2,000 years have we been seeing a return in fillet knife enthusiasts. Even though the number of fillet knife enthusiasts has been growing significantly in the past few decades, there hasn't really been any major conflicts fought over which knife is better. Though, there have been a few documented cases of fillet knife on Bowie knife attacks, and vice versa. In fact, in the past few years, there's been a significant rise in those attacks. I hope this isn't leading to something serious. The controversy as a whole has actually gotten way more heated recently. Maybe it'd be better to stay away from knife shows for the time being. Why is it so important to humans that we argue? Maybe to be human is to argue. Maybe to disagree is to exist. Does simply existing with a conscience mandate that we disagree with someone? Or is that just indicative of the number of people that live in our world? So many different upbringings and experiences create so many different people. As Aristotle, the great philosopher, said, always coffee edge.
As it stands, I have the fillet knife fully heat treated, and I need to grind bevels into it, which is what I'm going to do now. And I have the Damascus Bowie knife, complete with hole in it, and it actually looks pretty good in my opinion. I have a piece of bronze which I'll grind so I can use it as a guard for the Damascus Bowie, and then a piece of micarta that I can use for the handle.
Now that I've drawn myself out of my philosophical musings, let's talk about the Bowie knife guard, and the fillet knife's absence of a guard. And as you may be able to guess, yes, this is another point of controversy. For many knife collectors, a guard is an essential element. It protects your hand when you're using the knife. Who wouldn't want that? However, it's not essential to the fillet knife's purpose, so it doesn't exist on a fillet knife, at least not to my knowledge. The Bowie knife's combination of a guard and a clip point and a false back edge, or maybe even a real back edge, means that it's for thrusting. The fillet knife, however, is curved, it's thin, it would be terrible at thrusting, and as usual, the debate rages on. Bowie knife enthusiasts going, well, does your knife have that? And fillet knife enthusiasts responding, it doesn't need that. That little back and forth I demonstrated to you there is actually almost the whole debate about which is better. So, why would someone choose either of these knives? Well, while both display outdoorsy uses in our world today, I think the Bowie knife represents a more minimalist approach, despite its styling generally being over the top. And no, I don't mean minimalist from a knife approach. I mean it from the person who owns the knife. They just want to take one knife into the wilderness. They want to go it alone. So if that matches you to some extent, I think the Bowie knife is a perfect fit for you. And if you're into things designed for specific purposes, I would go the fillet knife. And also, maybe if you're fishing. Now I'm going to do a pros and cons list. I'm going to be objective, so please don't hate me. I'll start by doing pros and cons of the Bowie knife. The pros include a wider array of uses. Yes, it does have more applications than a fillet knife. The second pro is, and please don't hate me, fillet knife guys, you are great, it's styling. The Bowie knife just usually looks better, and you have more options for styling it. Now on to the cons list. First of the cons is it's heavier. Surprisingly, yes, I know, it's heavier. Next on the cons list is actually size. It takes up a wider blueprint. It's generally thicker. You just can't get around that. Now for the fillet knife pros. And yes, Please don't be mad, Bowie knife enthusiasts, but the fillet knife cuts better. It has a thinner edge, less durable, but it cuts better. Now for the second pro. While I do think the Bowie knife looks better, the fillet knife is just so iconic, and I don't think the design will ever change, and I believe that's worth something. Now, if you were listening through the video, you know what the con is going to be. It's bad material. Generally, they're made out of unhardenable steels, which is a real bring down. And for the second con, it's less durable. I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but it does need to be said that a fillet knife will probably break under stress faster than a Bowie knife will. Now that I've mostly fleshed out the issue, I'm realizing I haven't really touched on ergonomics. While it isn't really part of the controversy, it's a point of interest that the handles of each knives in some way mimic their blades. The handle of the fillet knife adheres strictly to a utilitarian policy, oftentimes just being round and made out of one material. In its simple design, it never boasts a complex handle. Unlike the Bowie knife, while the fillet knife is usually comfortable, the Bowie knife varies. Bowie knife handles are often customized, sometimes even having a guard somewhere in the middle of the handle, and boasting a wide variety of materials. Despite the differences, the handles aren't really argued about in the controversy. But to decide which is an arguably better knife, or even objectively better knife, you need to examine the handles as well. It's actually quite odd nobody talks about this. Maybe the reason there isn't that much talk about the knives' respective handles is because they vary so much. Maybe, because of the differences in people's hand sizes, this should be left out of the argument. Now I want to mention this so I don't have to deal with it later. I'm not going to test both knives in the video and compare their performance, as I don't want to damage either of them, and I feel like the fillet knife clearly has a disadvantage. While the fillet knife people might hate me for saying that, it's the truth. I would have needed to grind the fillet knife like a Bowie knife to test them evenly, or vice versa. There's not really a happy middle ground, and doing either of those things would be quite sacrilegious. Not to mention extremely offensive to both groups involved. Both of these knives have such rich histories. I'm not even sure one can be decidedly better. I once heard someone say, engineering is about trade-offs. You can't have a super strong edge without it being thick. You can't have an incredibly thin edge without it being fragile. In fact, I think this quote perfectly encapsulates the argument between these two sides. Maybe nothing is best, simply preferable. Can an argument ever come to an end if it's dictated by either side's preferences? For as long as either knife has existed, there's been people who preferred one or the other. The Bowie knife has generally been maintained as far more popular, but being popular doesn't make it better. And quite conversely, being in the minority doesn't make it better either. The Bowie knife has a very strong argument for being better. It's more popular. More people like it. The fillet knife supporters will actually attack this, though. They say that it's only more popular because people will join it to become popular. Seems kind of like a circular fallacy to me, but who am I to judge? Oh wait, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Hardcore Bowie knife fans will argue that because the Bowie knife is more expensive, that makes it better. While not completely solid logic, their reasoning does make quite a bit of sense. Is it more expensive because it's a genuinely better product? Or, again, because it's more popular? In fact, in the past few years, it's mostly been a popularity contest between these two knives, as opposed to which one is actually better. When people own or buy one of these knives, they're making a statement about themselves. I suppose that to determine which one is better, you need to think about which statement is better. I think to end the debate, I'll need to finish these knives, then compare them in person. I guess that was kind of the point of making them in the first place. Now, the Bowie knife was more difficult to make, hands down. However, that in no way relates to how good of a knife it is. As a case in point, the Bowie knife has the guard, which is quite difficult to do, and the fillet knife doesn't, as discussed earlier. I think I'll just let myself finish these knives, then I'll give my final thoughts at the end of the video. Ta-da! They're both done. And do I know which is better? No. No, I do not. I really like how both of them look, how both of them feel, and I'm quite grateful to the people who ordered them. While they both might be on opposite sides of this argument, they both have really good taste in knives. In the end, I think figuring out which is better is impossible, since they both look amazing, both feel amazing, and both function amazing. It is truly beyond me to tell you which is better. If you found this video enlightening, please share it with some people you know, because it took me a very, very long time.
Well, there you have it. I've made both knives, I've discussed the pros and cons, the history, and even why someone in particular would prefer either knife. Feel free to discuss what you think about the matter and which you prefer in the comments. But remember, when you are talking to someone, you're talking to a real human being. They are entitled to their own opinion. And also bear in mind that the Bowie knife is better in every conceivable way. Goodbye.